So we are reaching out to women specifically, and we are trying to make it not intimidating, because that's kind of what they hear blockchain and they go like, no, I'm not a coder. That's what I hear. When I start asking, would you be interested? When I say the word blockchain hackathon, the answer is, I'm not a coder.
Today I talked to Anna Vladi on the Speaking of Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Grinnell. Anna's a motivational leader and a blockchain advisor and investor. She's the founder of Women for Blockchain, which she created to help empower, educate, and promote women in the blockchain space. Anna's also worked as an advisor for fintech companies such as Accenture and Everex Global. Anna and I dive into why blockchain technology is revolutionary and exciting. We talk about some of the innovative ways it can be used, like in a peer-to-peer network of energy sharing driven by solar power. Can you imagine a world where we're buying solar-powered electricity from our neighbor at a lower cost than from the energy company? Or we're selling power to a friend for a rate that we think is fair? From Anna's perspective, that world isn't far off. We also talk about Anna's Women for Blockchain company and their upcoming conference and hackathon. Anna shares with me her enthusiasm for educating women and being part of the future of women coders who will create their own uses for blockchain technology. It was great to talk to Anna as someone who's eager to champion women in this blockchain revolution. So to kick off the Speaking of Crypto podcast with episode 1, here's my conversation with Anna Vladi.
Are you looking to take your knowledge of Bitcoin, blockchains, and cryptocurrencies to the next level? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Speaking of Crypto with your host, Shannon Grinnell.
So, Anna, just wondering why blockchain technology? Like, what was it that got you interested in the beginning? And then maybe we can get into your background, but what was it that sparked your interest in whether it's cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, or Ethereum? But the technology of blockchain, where did that come from?
So like 2013, a friend of mine who moved to Bangkok came for a visit to New York.
Okay.
And we went for dinner, and he was talking about Bitcoin and how he has a company where he's pegging gold bars with Bitcoin.
Okay.
Like, tell me what that is. He goes,
Yeah.
This cool technology. It's a distributed ledger, and it's transparent. And he's a finance guy, so I come from SAP background. It was easy for me to understand. It's a ledger that basically everybody shares. So,
right.
And with a lot of functionality there in terms of peer-to-peer trading, and you can do value exchange, and he's like, it's like a PayPal.
Right.
Just different currency, and you bypass intermediaries, and it can open up so many different things in financial markets. So we had this long conversation about it, and I was very interested. At the time, there was no news channels, nothing like that. So all the information was at forums. So if you wanted to get any information, that's where you would go. So it kind of looked like dark web.
Yeah, early days. It was difficult to find information, I understand.
You couldn't get much, and we were like sharing across. He was, whatever information he had. And then a year later, he came back and he was like, well, we're kind of changed courses and we're looking at Ethereum now. We're building this new application on Ethereum and this complete new technology. Remember when I told you about Bitcoin? So this is different. This is smart contracts. Imagine where law becomes code, basically.
Right.
And that was fascinating for me. I was like, wow, this is incredible. There's so much potential. You can do so many different things with this. And that's kind of where I got really into it, because another friend of mine who is in Tennessee, that's where I'm from, he was looking into it as well for his hoteling business. And he was also kind of dipping in and understanding and going to different conferences and investing. And that's the time when I invested, because when I understood it completely, when I started reading about it, it was $2, and then it went up for $8. I'm like, okay, but I better get some.
Right.
Just to put a number in.
Yeah. And are you talking about Ethereum now?
Yeah,
Right.
like nothing crazy. And that's kind of when I bought in, and I just held it. And then I started getting involved with a few projects here and there, and just learning a lot about it. Um, and I mean, that's basically how it all started.
Right, right. Well, as you're saying, like right from the very beginning, when your friend was describing it as sort of a PayPal, I think even back in early days, it was, I'm sure, very difficult to figure out what it was and what the uses would be, and even how to explain it to other people. So,
Yep.
because it sounds so limiting to think of it as PayPal, but then, as you're, learning more and hearing things like the smart contracts, which sounds very revolutionary, as you say, that law can become code at that point, that you were ready to jump in and be a part of it for sure.
Right, because when you understand the possibilities of it, and it's like mind-boggling, really. I mean, you can. And the thing is, it's actually very simple. Like if you really think about it, it's you basically have whoever's on the network. It's like 10 people in the room, and everybody knows each other's transaction. You know exactly what's happening.
Right.
So that's like so simple. It's like so easy. Nobody controls it. Nobody has a central database where it's sitting, right? Everybody's part of it. So it's truly decentralized.
Right.
And I think the concept is very simple.
Yeah, it seems like a fair way to do business, with that kind of transparency that seems to come with the technology.
Right. You would think like public companies should definitely have a transparent ledger because they're public, right? Shouldn't it be public?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, then why don't we talk about where do you see the future? What do you see the future being of the blockchain? And I know you have your foundation. Is the foundation the Women for Blockchain?
It's not a foundation. It's just a project at this time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's just something I started last year, and it's evolving. And the goal is really to reach and teach women about blockchain. And I have so many of my friends that are completely oblivious to what this technology can do. I was just talking to an attorney yesterday, a friend of mine. She's in bankruptcy, and she's like, "Well, how does that touch me? It's so separate from me." I'm like, "Well, Julia, in 3-4 years, what could happen is if all the assets are digitized, then we're not going to need attorneys anymore, because whatever contract you're drawing up, we're going to use smart contract for that."
Right.
So, I mean, the jobs will become obsolete. So at least think from that perspective.
Right. That you can have that all embedded in the technology and not need the use of a lawyer, because you'll have the contract in there. And do you find that most women are not involved? Are there very few women who are involved or understand? Like, what's been your experience?
I feel that there are like two types of women. There's one type that's, they're very happy where they are. They don't want anything to be changed. They're busy with their jobs, and, they have their family life, and they're not interested in anything extra. Right. Anything extra for them is like going to a theater or planning a vacation.
Right.
And then there are those that, trying to, some of them saying, change the world, go get into this technology and see the potential, what it can do, educate others. I think the biggest thing is educate others. I think we should be trying to get others involved into it to understand the potential. Like, I'm talking to my mother all the time, and she's like, "I don't know what this means." I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, I love where you're coming from, that you're trying to bring women together and help women explain to other women what's happening and where this potential is. And, you seem to be really excited about the technology, and you see it in a simple fashion. So why not, bring that sentiment and that mentality to others?
Right. You don't have to be. I feel like a lot of people, when this talks about blockchain and you start talking about technology, I guess they glaze over you, because once you get into the technical details, but you don't have to get into technical details, right? You can keep it on a 4,000 feet level and explain the use cases, right? And explain how it works in a business or use case, and just stop there. You don't need to explain technology to an attorney. You just can talk about limitations maybe and the functionality that exists and how it can be used, but you don't have to get into the coding of the code. That's not really necessary. But I feel like a lot of conversation do get into that, and people get intimidated. They go, "Oh, this is way too much. I'm not a math person. This is over my head."
I found that myself.
They lose interest.
I just found as the more I was getting into cryptocurrencies and learning about blockchain, I really did find the conversations that I would hear, they'd start to go down the road of proof of work and proof of stake. And I thought, that's not what I'm most interested in. It was like I was looking for a translator. And it seems like you're able to do that, that you're able to sort of understand the technology in a way that you can also translate it to make it digestible for sort of the average person.
Yeah, I would say that, because for me, when I look at it, I can get into the details of it, and I can explain to you proof of work and proof of stake, and actually in very simplistic terms. But at the same time, I can keep it on a very high level, and I mean, depending on the audience, of course.
Right.
And just talk about the use cases and the functions of it, and I can explain it to a 5-year-old. I can explain it to a 30, like depending on the who you have in front of you.
Right.
There is a way to explain it, absolutely.
Okay, well maybe let's back it up a little bit. Like, can you give me a basic explanation of what Bitcoin is and what the use is, and then maybe how Ethereum has gone, a little bit further with the same technology?
So Bitcoin was literally just sending payment to each other, right? Like PayPal. Because you cannot put any terms and conditions in PayPal. You cannot say that when I get delivery of this, I will pay you money. There's nothing like that. There's no rule that you can insert into that. You can just send money. That's all you can do, right?
Right.
Everything else happens
outside digital currency.
Outside of PayPal. So everything else happens outside of Bitcoin. What Vitalik did was he kind of looked at it and said, oh, but why is it so limited? And I totally get it why he was thinking this. Mm-hmm. Because, you can do so much more with this. Like, if I want to send money, don't you want to put terms and conditions into it? Like, why would I send you money? What needs to happen? Some kind of milestones. And that's what he did. That's the smart contract. And then he was also looking at, like, how do you incentivize the right way? And this is, I guess, I don't know. I think there was a different guy who came up with the concept of token.
Okay.
I forgot his name. Somebody else was, I guess, playing with it. And then they also had this, decentralized organization, the democracy that you can actually create on Ethereum. I thought the concept was very fascinating until somebody stole a lot of money from it.
Right.
Right. But it was a very interesting concept. So they really started, the way that I think he imagined it was like building new economy, building new governance structure. I mean, that's really what it's all about. I mean, don't forget that the whole thing started because of the financial crisis, right?
Absolutely.
When the trust was lost in government and banks, and rightfully so. I mean, look at what happened.
Yeah, so they were looking for a way around the centralization of people having their money in banks or with mortgage and that housing crisis and things like that. So definitely revolutionary to decentralize currency. It's fascinating for sure. Yeah, for sure. So it's a very interesting concept, and I think Vitalik took it much, much, much further. And now all the upgrades that they're working on from this ZK Snark zero knowledge proof, which is, I think, it's a return to banks that are saying, "Oh, we need our privacy," and you're not providing the privacy. But the thing is, it is provided. It's just not in the context that the banks need it. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, so banks, you can show a name, but you cannot show the amount. Where in Ethereum, you show the amount, you don't show the name. It's just reverse.
Right.
If you think about it, that's really the bank, and that's the privacy that they're bringing up and saying that's not what's going to work for us. But that's if you really think about it, that's something maybe you should look at your business model and maybe you should change it. I mean, this technology is forcing you to do that.
Right, because it sounds like the banks want to have their cake and eat it too, while they can use or embrace the technology at their own convenience in order to be able to keep the data that they're interested in. Whereas decentralization allows all the data to be on the blockchain and not just held by one organization like a bank.
Right.
From what I understand.
Right. So it's not in their interest to be on the public blockchain. And I think that's what JP Morgan Quorum did, because as you understand what Amber was talking about, she said she copied everything from Ethereum except for the privacy security layer that the banks needed. I think she mentioned 90-something% of Ethereum was just copied.
Interesting.
And then that whatever 7% that they needed to change, that's what they changed.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. And
Right.
why don't we get into what are some of the other uses of blockchain technology that you see as we go forward, rather than just currency? What do you see happening with blockchain?
So I work for Accenture and I'm in energy, and I think that's number one industry that's going to be adopting it very quickly.
Okay.
I will tell you why. Because when I read use cases of tracing apples and tracing food on blockchain, I laugh, honestly. I'm thinking, like, how in the world are you going to connect that apple to a blockchain? Are you going to put a chip into it? Like, are you going to do a gene mutation? Like, how are you actually going to get to the truth? Because the farmer can say it's organic, it's not organic, and it's really, he's the one who's saying it, right? You can't really track it.
Right,
So
right. Something
those
organic
use
like
cases, those use cases, they're not there yet. But energy is interesting because so I'm working on energy marketplace, something that we're exploring, and within the energy marketplace, so in energy you have generation of energy, then you have transmission, distribution. So the generation of energy, because of like Tesla roof and all the sun batteries, right, that you can use, the consumers are able to generate their own energy. And so far they've only been able to sell it back to the grid, but not to each other.
Right.
But you should be able to trade. Why not? If you're generating it, you should be able to give it to your neighbor.
Brilliant concept.
It's interesting, right? But you don't have the power lines for that.
To go from one neighbor to another, we can't just give it to our neighbor at this stage.
So I'm looking outside. I have PCNG power lines. So somebody like PCNG would lend into the blockchain the power lines, so the prosumers can actually trade it. Right. And the thing is that it's happening already. There are a bunch of POCs that are in works. And a lot of the utilities are realizing that piece of the business, if they're generating, through the sun power, then that may be the business they will lose. So if they're smart, they're trying to get ahead of that and see how they can actually make money on it, like leasing the transmission lines, maybe building services on top of it. Not everybody's in the same boat. There are other utilities that are generating clean energy, but it's hydro, for example, or wind.
Okay.
So you can find, like, I'm not going to generate that in the backyard. Absolutely not, right? So they're not in danger. But the ones that are using sun energy, they obviously have to reconsider their business model, and they have to reconsider their revenue streams.
And it sounds like what you're saying is, I mean, it would be really helpful for a consumer to be able to sell to another consumer at their own price. But how, is that advantageous to the energy company? But as you're saying, like, if there's one energy company that's embracing this and others are not, then they will need to catch up with that technology in order to be in the competitive market, I suppose. Correct.
I mean, they don't want to be the blockbuster, of where Netflix comes in and shoves them out of the picture. Right. So they have to be smart. And they cannot be oblivious of what's happening.
Yeah.
So a lot of them.
Go ahead.
A lot of them are realizing that they need to get ahead of that, and they need to think about it, and they do need to change their models of working.
Right. So. Yeah, I mean, I love your example with Blockbuster and Netflix. It does seem like blockchain technology is going to be something that companies are going to need to keep up with as we go forward, because it seems like it has uses all over the place.
Right. Because in a lot of cases, you will be left behind.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, and in an energy sense, or where else do you see where a business may be left behind?
Well, anywhere that you can, if blockchain can be connected to the real world, so from manufacturing to wearables, for example, so anywhere where you can insert a chip and then you can connect to technology, you can, right? But if you think about, they're talking about drugs, they're talking about food, I'm not seeing it. I don't know how, because you can't trust what another person puts into the computer. That's not trust, right? That's right away.
Yeah, when we're talking something that's digestible, like organic, I think it's more difficult to track and to kind of assess at the starting point.
They can do containers maybe, right? I mean, they has to be boxed into something, so they can track containers. So in shipping, for example, it can be done. Transportation, it can be done. But to actually track quality of food, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying those. I don't see how that's going to be implemented. I'm not saying it.
Yeah, it seems like that's maybe a stretch or hard for us to envision at this point.
Futuristic,
there
right?
you go. There you go. Well,
for sure.
Why don't we take a step back and let me ask you about cryptocurrency, and where do you see the future of cryptocurrency going? Do you see it as currency, or people have talked about Bitcoin being store of value, like digital gold? What are your thoughts about cryptocurrencies?
It's definitely going to stay. Absolutely. No doubt about it. I mean, Japan legalized it last year. America is, very slow. I mean, it's going to take some time. They have to wrap their heads around it. But I don't think it's going anywhere.
It seems to make a lot of sense in terms of just the ease of transactions. We're so used to not using cash or fiat anymore, that for a consumer, from a consumer standpoint, I don't think it would be that much of a leap to go from tapping my credit card or sending an e-transfer to sending a cryptocurrency to peer-to-peer or to a business.
Yeah, of course, because I think there's a company, I was just looking at them, they're creating a credit card with the crypto behind it. So what's the difference, right? If you have that in your wallet or you have an Amex, you don't know what's behind it.
Right.
Yeah, as long as the retail starts accepting cryptocurrency, right? I mean, that's kind of that's what
the holdup at this point.
Yeah, the adoption of that. But as people realize and the retailers are understanding what the value is, they're adopting it. I mean,
right.
I see coffee shops in New York.
Yeah, it's fantastic that there's ATMs now in Canada.
ATMs, yeah.
Which is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, back to your Women for Blockchain. I read on your website, I really love this. It says, the engineering of every blockchain solution requires the power of three minds: business, legal, and technical. So I was just wondering how you see these three areas of expertise coming together. How do you see business, legal, and technical minds coming together?
Any problem that you have to solve, you have to start with the business process, right? And business model. And then there's always legal part of it. We just haven't been doing much of it because the laws haven't changed. We don't need them to change, right?
Right.
But here it forces us to look at different models. So a lot of different use cases will require government to adopt and change.
Right. So by legal, you mean government or,
governance, regulatory, right? So, and who is better to help them than attorneys? So in order for them to do that, they have to be educated about the technology. But again, not at 5,000 feet level, 4,000 feet level.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like, because not everybody needs to be a developer in order to understand how the technology works. I think that's what you're explaining, that it is digestible, it is understandable if we can kind of look at it at that level.
Right. Accenture has 500 jobs right now, I believe something. We have the highest number of jobs hiring in blockchain.
Oh, fantastic.
And they're not all technical.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what's happening in the marketplace.
It really is on the forefront and, revolutionary, I would say.
Right. I just, because I've been trying to approach Accenture to give us a sponsorship for this because, this work is outside of Accenture.
Right.
And I finally got a response saying, because I approached it from a different direction. I was like playing with it this way, that way, money, sponsorship, whatever. But then finally, I thought, okay, so we're educating women. And for example, if my utility tomorrow wants to do a POC, I don't have skills. We got to send our women to this kind of workshop, to this hackathon, because we will have, it's an immersive learning experience. It's not just hacking, it's learning and it's developing. It's an immersive learning experience.
Yeah. So tell me about the hackathon. So that's the hackathon at the beginning of June in New York City.
Right. So it's a 3-day hackathon where it's all women. The hackathon, we are trying to attract all women.
Amazing.
We're accepting, I think I got an application today from a high school student, from a
Oh,
high school
wow.
girl.
Oh, amazing.
My daughter said that if there's going to be a few high school students, she would join. She's
Oh,
12.
wonderful. That's fantastic. I
So I
love
said,
it.
okay. I said,
Oh,
fine, we'll find you a group.
oh, that's great. That's
Right.
great. Well, my son
And
is into robotics and he's 13. And I've
exactly.
seen some young
Hmm.
girls who, well, there's a couple on his robotics team and it's fascinating. It's amazing. Well, I'm proud of your daughter, but I expect her to follow through with her word and
Oh,
be
she
there.
would. She would. She would. I don't want to be like all adults, but they're going to be other kids. Sure, I'll join.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
she's,
Oh,
yeah.
fantastic. That's wonderful.
So the hackathon is really going to be three different tracks: business, legal, and technical. We will see if it's going to be really they're going to choose a use case and all three parts will be worked on. It has to be something simple. For example, the energy one would not work because the
Okay.
technical part, there's no way you can build that very quickly.
Right.
But the regulatory model can be done, business model can be done, but the technical not. So if they choose a case that all three parts can be done together, then maybe they'll form a team and do it like that. And there are also use cases where they all work separately, but they can collaborate because as the technical team, for example, comes up with a use case, they can check with the business and hey, does this make sense? Because unfortunately, I see a lot of hackathons coming up with some ideas that like don't have any use cases. Like they're not solving a problem. They're just I don't know where
Yeah,
they
and
come
it's
up with
really
that
important
stuff.
to be able to do that. Could you give me an example just so we understand what you mean by like what would be a simple use case that you could use as a case study or a case for your hackathon?
Maybe like a voting app on the blockchain, right?
Okay,
Because that's easy to
fantastic.
develop, but you still need to think about the business case for it and legal case for it, like how, like even like presidential voting, just
Right.
as an example. And I think that one should be very easy to do on all three parts, and in those 2.5 days, it's enough time. But
And
the
would you
complex.
divide your the participants? Do you divide them up into different sectors, or they each have to come up with like in groups, come up with those three aspects: the legal and the business and the
So
technical side?
usually they work in work streams, right? They're still one team. If they decide they're going to hackle one use case and all three areas of it, but there's still going to be three work streams within.
Okay.
But they should be able to collaborate with each other, making sure because the technology piece has to answer back to the business requirement, right?
Right. Right.
And when they're testing, they have to go back and make sure, hey guys, is that the requirement? Are we answering what you guys put into the business model? And the same goes with the legal model.
Oh,
So it's like
fantastic.
a so that it's kind of like a project, like the same thing you would do in an IT project. You would
Yeah.
involve all the different parties.
Yeah, it
Um,
sounds similar to my son's robotics competitions. There are several
mhm.
elements, and one of them has to do with their presentation. Another has to do with their innovation, like what solution are they solving with their invention. And then they also have like Lego, a robot that has to go through this table team. And I can't remember what the fourth one is, but there's four different aspects for each time that they go to a competition. So it sounds very similar where you have these, different aspects and they all have to work together as a team and, come up with this essentially like a solution to a problem.
Right, right.
Fantastic. Oh, it sounds really exciting. I love that it's all women. It's great. And speaking of that, did you see Melton Demers, who was interviewed on Fortune's Balancing the Ledger? She was
Yeah.
basically saying that we don't do a good job marketing to women in the crypto and blockchain space, because she mentioned that 60% of wealth is controlled by women, and women are responsible for 80% of consumer
Mhm. Mhm.
spending.
Mhm.
But we're not really communicating the value or the use for cryptos and blockchain technology well enough to women, and here you are with Women for Blockchain. But what do you think about that comment?
So we are marketing to women specifically, from reaching out to universities to actually conducting info sessions in the city. I'm doing one in my house next week. The
Fantastic.
team is doing. The Toronto girls are doing it. Crypto Chicks. So we are reaching out to women specifically. And we are trying to make it not intimidating, because that's kind of what they hear blockchain and they go like, no, I'm not a coder. That's what I hear.
Right.
When I start asking, would you be interested, when I say the word blockchain hackathon, the answer is, I'm not a coder.
Right. It does seem like maybe that's what you need to know, or at least understand, in order to become involved.
Right. And that's what we have to explain, that you don't need to have coding skills. There is no prior experience required. You will be taught. We're providing education. And I think that's the differentiator for us. Few weeks before the hackathon, we're providing education by Blog Gigs, by Cosmos, by Zastrin. And then CryptoChicks is doing one. I will probably do a webinar. I just do them a lot myself, just in my current job. So we're providing a lot of knowledge transfer prior to. So when they come, they already come prepared.
Fantastic. So if someone were trying to get in touch with at least some of what you're doing, or get some education, where would you direct them? What would you advise someone who's interested in finding out more?
I think Blog Geeks, and they're our sponsor, I think their blogs are phenomenal. They're really, really good.
Right.
I follow them on everywhere from Twitter to Facebook, and I read all the time.
Fantastic.
You have to read a lot. There's a lot on YouTube, of course. Zastrin has really nice workshops, and there's a lot of blogs. Preeti Kasaredi, I don't know if you know who she is.
No.
She has a nice blog on the Medium, and she really breaks it down exactly like, this technical piece you don't understand, let me break it down for you.
Fantastic.
She does a really good job at that. And if you want to get into a little bit deeper, I always suggest go read white paper of Ethereum, go read yellow paper of Ethereum. And if math is not going to kill you, it's going to make you stronger.
Is it understandable for the average person, do you think? If
you are good in math,
Okay.
if you're good in math, and if you did your homework in high school, you will be fine. Unfortunately, in our high schools in the United States, public schools, STEM is not very strong, and I'm sure you know that.
Right.
A lot of other countries are ahead of us, and that's the biggest problem.
Right.
My daughter does math. My daughters, I have two, they do math all the time.
Fantastic.
I have extra help coming in. I strongly believe that with math, you can do anything from becoming a doctor to a lawyer, because it teaches you to think. And that's definitely a core subject. You can get any job when you have a math degree.
Yeah, because it's not just numbers, it's about problem solving, which
Exactly.
I think is valuable wherever you are. Yeah. So the other question I want to ask you was about an article that I saw on Forbes, written by Rachel Wolfson. And this was really on the negative side, or the negative impact of grouping women together in this space specifically, and talking about all women panels or women areas at blockchain and crypto conferences. But what do you think about women grouping women together in this way?
I haven't seen much of it. I would love to see a lot of it. And when I can say, oh, it's too much. I am tired of going to a conference when I see all women. And that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of men, and sprinkled with a lot of women. I'm going to Women on the Block. I'm speaking at Women on the Block conference during the New York Blockchain Week.
Fantastic.
Yes, they're all women.
Right.
But that's the first one. We're going to be the second one. And I don't know if we're going to have all women. We're going to have majority of women. I can't say we're going to have all women.
Right.
Hackathon is all women. But the conference, I'm sure we're going to have some men there.
Right.
They have all women. And that's my first one.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And so what sort of percentage, when you go to conferences, generally do you see of women to men?
I actually calculated under 20%.
Wow. Yeah.
Under 20%.
Quite something. I was at
there's not a lot of women founders also.
Right.
So I think it's very important to highlight women founders of different blockchain companies, not just technology, but whatever services they offer. I think that's also important.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about promoting founders, and you're also talking about teaching young women and really educating women of all ages. What are your other goals with Women for Blockchain?
So I have a little bit of ulterior motive. I'm actually looking for a strong technical team. for my other project. So that's one of my goals. Also, with Women for Blockchain, I'd like to build a media company.
Okay.
And I kind of would like to kind of break down the barriers. And again, we're not all women. We will accept men. And if a guy calls me up, said, I want to be in your chick hackathon, I'm going to take the guy. Believe me. I don't think he's going to want to be there. Some of them are just asking for the sake of, are you accepting women to the hackathon? If I want to come, can I come? Yes, you can come.
You're not excluding men. You're just
we're
inviting
not.
women.
We're just
Right.
Exactly. We're not excluding men. We're inviting. I like how you said that. Absolutely. So I would love to build a media company out of this. I've been trying to do one in tech space since I can remember, probably. So that's something I'm contemplating. We will see what happens. We'll see how this event will go. We are planning a next one in September. The plan is to have them every 3 months, 4 times a year. And we look, we have a great relationship with NYU. They're co-sponsoring this one. And if our relationship goes further, we may be able to do more.
So this would be the Hackathon and Conference that you try and do 4 times a year.
Yes.
Wonderful. Great.
That's the plan.
Fantastic. Just back to your other project. Are you talking about this media team? Is that what you mean by your other project, or you have something else?
No, it's a technical startup.
Oh, fantastic. Does it have to do with blockchain technology?
Yes, it does.
Did you want to share? Are you interested in sharing?
Sounds exciting. I'm looking into building a crypto exchange. Like, we need another one, but I would like to do it a little bit differently. I'd like it to be decentralized. So we're working on a model to see how we can do that. Okay. Because right now all the crypto exchanges, they're not decentralized. They're central. They have a central, authority.
Yeah, almost all of them are. I understand there's something called Open Ledger that is decentralized, and there's another one that the name is escaping me at the moment. But I have heard it. They're just not as well known, I think, as obviously the centralized exchanges. Now, can you explain the difference? Because I don't know that everyone knows the difference between a decentralized exchange or why don't we talk about what is decentralization? And then maybe you could talk about what a decentralized versus a centralized exchange is. Because I think most people think of Coinbase when they're exchanging cryptocurrencies.
Coinbase is very centralized, not to mention they're backed by investor funding, like hedge funds. They did traditional fundraising, right? So that's very centralized.
And
so
what
there's
does
like
it
a pool
mean
of money
to be centralized, right?
So there's a pool of money, right, that comes. I don't remember exactly which hedge funds allocated money for them,
right?
But because it's there's a certain agenda, there's a certain set of rules that they go by, where if you do a crowdfunding campaign, basically, where you can have ownership come in from whoever's using the network, kind of like the same thing you would do as an ICO, but really specifically for exchange. You can give them the rights of usage, and there are other rules that can come into play there.
Right.
The thing is, it's a very interesting concept. It's a very difficult one to implement. So we're still working on the model, how that would work.
Yeah, and can you just explain what centralized means versus decentralized?
So centralized, it's where there's one controlled authority, right? So if I have to, for example, Coinbase, and I have an account there. So if anything goes wrong, I go to Coinbase and, technical support, blah, 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 and they have to resolve my issues. Where in decentralized manner, there's a consensus mechanism how any problems would get resolved. So it's a difficult, like I said, it's a difficult one to implement.
Right, right. And also it seems like centralization is where you have a middleman, as it were, whereas decentralized exchange is direct peer-to-peer. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, that sounds really exciting. Sounds like a great project, and I wish you well with that. And some of the things that you mentioned with the Block Geeks and some of the other recommendations, I'll make sure to put those in our show notes so that people have access to that. And anything that you would like to say to a young woman, let's say, who's starting out in the blockchain movement, I'll call it. What would you give them as words of advice?
I probably would say don't get discouraged. Learn a lot, be a lifelong learner. And I guess don't lose the drive. I mean, it's very easy to get discouraged, but you need to move forward.
Yeah, and well, it's funny that you say lifelong learner because you had said you think there's two types of women. People who are sort of set in their ways. You kind of describe people who are happy to just continue doing what they're doing, and then those who are out there, looking for new and different and trying to, change things or be part of the change. So it makes sense that you would give that kind of advice to young women as well. It sounds like you're, trying to head the change as well. So I applaud you for that and the work that you're doing with Women for Blockchain. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Oh, so Anna, where can we get in touch with you if someone wanted to reach out to you? What's a good place to contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. It's my first and my last name, so it's very easy to find me.
Wonderful.
I'm pretty responsive, so very approachable. So
wonderful. Well, it's been so wonderful talking with you, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up in person soon.
I hope so too. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, thanks so much, Hannah.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Speaking of Crypto with Shannon. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit speakingofcrypto.com and Facebook and Twitter at Speaking Crypto. We'll catch you next time.